Good afternoon, guys. It's IPM in Sydney. Beautiful evening of cloudy and chilly day, and I appreciate you taking your time and trying to learn new features in Java 9. And I'll start this series of lessons. And yeah, my goal will be to break down all the API one by one. But as usual, when we start, we move from easy to hard tasks, and today we'll break down Java 9 interfaces, and then we will move on to try with resources, stream API, memory is a reactive streaming, uh, Java shell, modular approach, and other lessons. So overall, I intend to do around 5 to 7, 8 videos, and I'll break down everything. And of course, there will be a lot of comparison with Java 8 API, Java 7 API, why it's done, and why it's making us better. To introduce a bit myself, uh, so my name is Felix, and I do work as a Java developer in a software company based in Sydney. I started working with this technology more than 5, 6, or even 7 years ago, and I love it from the bottom of my heart. So I also managed to get multiple certification from Oracle in this area, like I'm Oracle certified professional in Java 6, 7, and 8, and all my exams were passed with 90 to 95%, and I'm also Oracle certified expert in J2EE in web components and web services, and I also love cloud technologies like Amazon, and I'm Amazon Web Services Certified Developer Associate. Alright, that's enough for introduction. Thanks for your time, and let's move on. So, Java 9 interfaces. What do I have? So, Java 9 interfaces has just one addition, which is the addition of the private methods in it. And to be honest, for the person who started Java multiple years ago, and I understand that it's different than it was, and like before, whenever you say interface, I imagine that it's just the definition of the method signatures and public static variables which will belong to the whole family. But yeah, the Java 8, Java 9 introduced a lot of changes, and I would say interfaces started to be dynamic, which means they started to do actions, which is nice and fun from one side, as long as you understand how it can influence the business logic, as long as you understand how it will influence your application, I find it's okay. So let's jump to IDE, and let's see the interface that I have. So here it is. As you see here, we have animals interface. One method is private, the other one is static, two others are defaults, and one is abstract. So let's break down one by one. What do we have? So before Java 8, what would we have? It would be only abstract methods like this, which means we have only method signature, and method is public by default, and it means any class that implements this interface will have to override it. So before Java 8, interfaces could not talk, I would say. And with Java 8, what do we get is that the opportunity to give us and our interfaces a bit of dynamics. So in Java 8, default methods and static methods were introduced, and here they are. So this guy, static method, print out static, and these two default methods. So what's the static and default methods in interfaces? default methods in interfaces same as methods in classes, but the plus is that any class that implements this interface will inherit this method. So now if you have something per your interface family, all you need to do is just write your method and then say my target class implements it, and then I'll just comment it for now, and then what you get is anyone who is using this target class can call print out something else default or print out something else default too, and all this class needs to do is just override one method. So this is how beautiful now interfaces with default methods, or the class could override the default method and introduce its own logic, which is also possible. So here it is, and we can say class which overridden interface default method. So whenever we call print out something else default from class instance, we always get the one which is overridden in class. So once again, the default methods in interfaces are the ones that are inherited by all the classes that implement this interface, and there is no need in the classes to write logic for them, unless you have something specific and you can just override them as you do overriding of the abstract classes. The other feature in Java 8 was added, which is static classes for the interfaces. So what's the idea? The idea is same as the idea of static class methods in classes. So this is one per class instance, and it belongs only to the interface. So when target class implements animals, it doesn't inherit this method. So you can't say tiger.printout static, because this method belongs only to animals. The only way to call it is animals.printout static. Plus, the tiger class can implement the static method with the same name of his own, or it can be just a simple method of his own. It doesn't matter, but these two will belong only to tiger class. So once again, this is about statics, this is about defaults, and the only notion about inheriting default methods is that how about this diamond rule, and how about Java inheritance, where multiple inheritance is not possible because some methods with the same name and with the same number of parameters can clash. So in this case, let's say tiger class implements animals2, which has another default method like this, with absolutely same signature and same number of parameters. What will happen is the compiler will give you an error, and you will be either required to override it in the class so that the compiler doesn't have any issues when you call this method from the instance, or you will be required not to implement this interface. So this is how simple it is, and I hope it is clear. So let's go back to our animals and Java 9. So why did I introduce private methods? I think answer is very obvious and very simple. For me, it is to reduce the duplication in the all default methods of interface. So same behavior as it is with classes. What do? We usually do refactoring, and as soon as we see the code is going to be duplicated, or when we do code reviews, we see a duplicate code, what we ask is to do a refactoring and then put the duplicating stuff in one method and then call it from there. So same here. Let's say these two default methods doing something which is general for them. So we just purify this logic to this. I will put it here to have more visibility. Sorry. say cut and say paste. Yep. So when two default methods have a logic which is duplicated, the first thing you do is refactoring and then put it into a private method and then calling it. So simple as that. This is the body of our private method, and keep an eye on that static method. Couldn't call a private method. Do you know why? So the answer is simple. Static methods belong to a class, and private method will belong to the instance of the class which will implement this interface. Which means, yeah, normally static methods belong to the class and they can't call instance methods, otherwise they have that instance initiated. So I hope this made it all clear in terms of why do we need private methods and interfaces, how do we use them. Once again, we usually call them from default methods to reduce duplication, to do refactoring, to do the generic things. And we also know that we can't call them straight from the static methods unless we have some instance and other things. And we also know about static methods now. We also know about how they participate in inheritance process. We also know about default methods, how they can call private methods, and how they participate in inheritance, and what happens if one class implements two interfaces with similar default methods, similar signature, and similar parameters. Or let's say we know what happens if class inherits the interface with static methods. So now it's about testing that out. So let's instantiate our Tiger instance, and let's say the first thing we'll check is probably even, yeah, is there any way we can see this private method? So the private method name was print out parents private. Do we have anything like that? As you see, we don't. And let's go back to the, yeah, as you see, we don't. So what we have in Tiger is child have to override method, which was abstract in our interface, which is normal. Then we have a default method in the interface, but it was overridden in the class method. And then we also have a default method which is still an interface, and then we should be also having the static method which belongs to Tiger, as you see. So which means it's a beauty. And then just to see what does our interface class has and what it can be called. All we see is that from the interface dot we can call only the static method. So let's call them one by one. Let's say call Tiger static method, which is this guy. Yep. It should be printing out saying in Java 9 class on static method. Yeah. And let's see what it calls. So Java class on static method. Oh, sorry, there is another printout which I should command, probably this guy. So what we have is just an instance, and then we call static method of a class from an instance. This is what we get. To call interface static method, once again, we just write interface dot, and we get it. Or to be more cleaner, we make it like this, Tiger dot static method. Yep, here it is. So this is all about calling static methods, the ones that belong to the class, and the ones that belong to the interface. Hopefully this is clear. So now let's move to calling, let's say Tiger class default methods. Yeah. As you see, the first default method was overridden by target class, which means now there is no way where we can access the method's default name but we're still having a default method from interface which is inherited by this class. Let's see if the name's method, yep, and then in the mid 2, yep, and now let's see if in class, yep, we got it. So let's save it and let's run it. So what we have is that Tiger class print out something else default. What does it do? It calls out the static of this class and then puts the message that it has overridden interface default method. So we got it. And then we're calling the default method that is still has a definition from the interface. So what it does is that it calls the private method of the interface. Here it is. Then it calls out the static method of the interface, and then it continues the behavior of the method. So what else is left? Seems like we covered pretty much all the cases. We discussed how we can use private methods, how we can use statics, how we can use defaults. To note, there is not changes at all with the variables, and the variables definitions are left as they are. So they all are public and static by default, and there is no interface instances variables whatsoever. So there's no interface instances, and there's only class instance that implements the interface. And be careful on the interviews with those questions where you can be asked about, can we call a default private method from static in interface, and why not? Can we call a private method from default, and why yes? How do we inherit two default methods that have the same signature in and method list in the same interface, in two interfaces, and implemented by one class, and many other tricks. And wish you good luck with implementing all of those rules in Java 9. Also wish you a lot of clean code and smooth code reviews. Good luck guys, thank you. I will continue and follow up with next videos.